Dr. Katherine Horton.
The problem is that it's a cognitive problem. We humans have been through the television films and the movies and maybe war zone experience, because millions of people sadly have them. We have been trained on ballistic weapons, and they are hopelessly outdated. So pretty much throughout the 20th century, we just didn't notice the really big weapons were all electromagnetic weapons. They are much better than nuclear weapons because you can exterminate entire cities and you don't contaminate the environment. So in other words, you can take over the city straight away. You just remove the corpses and you carry on where the other people left off. So this is why electromagnetic weapons are the worst weapons of mass destruction we ever had. But they are also the most secretive, precisely because they're so powerful. They come in big versions so that you can shoot out a plane out of a missile out of the sky. They come in handheld versions. They can be hidden in buildings. They can be hidden at your neighbors. They can be hidden anywhere around the street. So they are a booming industry that is now going to quintuple. So it's going to increase by 500% over the next 6 years roughly. And it is such a booming industry because it is so powerful and it can be used for so many nefarious means at zero cost. If you fire an AK-47, what that will do is it will leave bullet holes, it will leave forensic trails leading straight back to you, and it's pretty hard to find a silencer for those things, so people will hear who's fired the shots. When you fire a directed energy weapon, it's perfectly silent, it's lethal, it's immediate reload, so you have a machine gun that's even faster than the normal machine guns, mechanical machine guns we have. Okay, so that is directed energy weapons. Now, the 5G system is a directed energy weapon system. So in other words, what the governments are pulling up are weapons of mass destruction in the civilian domain. And, governments always had weapons of mass destruction. They always have their tanks of bio warfare and chemical warfare. They've got their nukes, but typically they're not, kept around the mall, at least not as far as we know. Maybe there's an underground bunker behind, a Walmart or shopping mall, but these weapons, they will be out in the public. They will be pulsing nonstop, and it will be just either a glitch or just somebody's, volition that will set them from the fairly harmless and survivable shot to the deadly shot. Okay, so that's what people have to realize. This is what I'm talking about. Now, I just put it out there, and most people think, oh gosh, she's crazy. I mean, who the hell would do something like that? And I want to pick people up where they're at. So first of all, I want to show what the 5G system really looks like in practice. Then I want to show, how the industry is actually gloating with it. They know that this is a weapon. They're gloating. They're jeering at us, and they're making fun of us. And then I will show you what this weapon is planned to be used for and is already being used for right now. So what I'm talking about is not just, oh, it's 5 years in the future. No, this system is killing people right now. And now the only question is the time lag between us realizing, accumulating a critical mass and shutting the system down and arresting the criminals, whoever, thought of putting this in the domain, knowing full well. Now that time delay pretty much maps out how many people are going to die. Okay. And this crime cartel that, I'm already jumping ahead, but I'll just tell you, in my view, there's a big organized global crime cartel. They know what they're doing, and their goal is to kill as many people as they possibly can. And that is because they realize that with the population growing and the internet coming in, they cannot hold the same type of control on humanity. It is mathematically impossible to hold the same type of control on humanity that they used to have, back in the 1980s, even the 1990s. And the control they had up until the 1990s was pretty much the control they had going back to biblical times and Babylonian times and before. So we have to understand that we're dealing with an organized crime cartel that is so completely out of its depth, even though it doesn't know what it is, they think they're winning, but they're going to hit the wall very hard. And in the non-linear process of realization, they're going to go, they're going to run amok. So we now have this weapon system. The plan is to use the time delay between us cottoning on, organizing ourselves, reaching critical mass, and shutting this down to kill as many people as they possibly can. That's right now, as I see it, that is the name of their game. Okay, so this is why informing yourself is so important. But what I say today shouldn't just stay with the listeners. It has to go on social media. It has to go to your relatives. It has to go to your friends. Don't be embarrassed of alerting people to this, because this is an actively shooting weapon system that is being deployed everywhere around the world. So what you do if you start activating your social networks is, because we are all connected through 3.5 degrees of separation, thanks to Facebook and social media, what you're doing is you are quickly informing a very large number of people, and you are shortening non-linearly the time it takes to inform the planet. So if everybody informs people, we really use the network mathematics, so the networks we have, and these networks are the reason the crime cartel is losing. That's what they're afraid of. But we need to use our power. If we just use the internet to send each other jokes and PowerPoint presentations with jokes in, we're not going to save our lives. So we have to use the networks we have and the internet to get life-saving information to each other. That's what's so important. And what we do by doing that is we are literally shortening this time. But when things go viral, something that would have taken maybe 20 years before to inform the entire planet can take as short as a week, and there are several CIA tests that actually show that. I think one CIA test, I believe it was a CIA test, is, for example, the ice bucket water challenge. Okay, at first a couple of people did this challenge of pouring a bucket of ice water over themselves, and then you blink, and next thing you know is, Donald Trump does it. So, and all your friends, because they think it's hilarious. Now, that is something, a meme going viral, okay? And with that, I think the CIA is measuring how quickly we can really, get information across, and they're putting, blocks in everywhere, and they are learning or trying to learn how can they contain what we know, and how can they cut us off, and all this to delay the time, delay our time, so that the cartel can continue killing. I think this is what all the YouTube shutdowns are about, all the Twitter shutdowns and suspensions, all the Facebook suspensions. They know they can't win. That's a given. They are playing on time, and they are hoping that we will die before we win. That's basically their last attempt. Okay, so now 5G comes into this big killing plan the following way. Number one, as I said, 3 and 4G are fundamentally different. Okay, so 3 and 4G, imagine you have, so a little, antenna, and then it's radiating out. So like the old drawings of a radio antenna always had an emitter, and then kind of concentric in 2D on the page, concentric circles. In 3D, those are spheres. So the radiation goes out spherically from the antenna and reaches everywhere. But because it goes out spherically, the intensity that hits you or your mobile phone reception drops off with the square of the distance. So it's an inverse square law. And the inverse square aspect of it comes purely from the fact that the surface of the sphere increases by the square of the radius. If you remember your school maths of how the surface of the sphere relates to its radius, it's the square of the radius. So as the radiation goes out, it has to kind of fill a bigger and bigger, surface effectively. So the intensity drops off, as it spreads out over the whole ever, increasing size of the sphere. Now that inverse square law stops applying as soon as you collimate this thing, and you are firing pulses, very collimated and kind of, people use the word focused. Focused means it's, focused on a point. Collimated means it's parallel. So it's kind of like, the beam shape stays over long distances, and it's just it's a little, kind of like a laser beam is collimated, okay? A very good laser beam stays the same width over a kilometer, you know? So when you do that, you don't spread out the energy over a sphere anymore, and then the intensity is pretty much, well, there's some losses with scatter in the air, but they are minimal in certain frequencies, and this means the intensity stays pretty much the same at large distances. In other words, you can be shot in the face across town or across, you know, a street with the same intensity as if you stood next to the antenna system. Okay, it's just the same intensity at every distance. Now there you can already tell that, hang on, suddenly distance from the source stops being protection. And we already know this sort of effect when, for example, you know, people point a laser pointer at your eye. You can be standing across the classroom or across the street. If it's a dangerous laser and they point it in your eye, they damage your eye, and it doesn't matter how distant you are. But imagine now when people put up invisible microwave towers where the power of your microwave is pointed at you and you can't even run away. Even if you run a mile, you would still be shot in the head with the same power. Okay, give or take, you know, some losses on the way, but they're surprisingly low. Now that is the system. That's what you have to understand. 5G is this collimated system, and it's more than that. It's pulses. And pulses are always worse than just a continuous beam, because in the pulse itself, there's such a mix of frequencies. They hit basically a lot of resonant frequencies, can cause a lot of heating, a lot of damage, you know, so a pulse is always deadlier than a continuous beam of one set frequency. Okay, so this is what it is. And now I've just said this to you, and you probably wonder, okay, how the hell does she know, and does she have any evidence? I would like to share my screen and show people. Let me point you to a document I found extremely helpful, and it's this document here. I hope you guys can see my website, so I don't want to push my website, but on here, on stop007.org, you'll find a research library that I hope you will find useful. If you scroll down to the bookshelf here, you will find an index, and somewhere here there's genocide and assault methods 5G. So please click on 5G, and you will immediately be taken to a document that was a presentation by experts from Rode and Schwartz. By the way, there's an R missing. So Rode and Schwartz is a German weapons company. Okay, now that should already, you know, make you listen up. And there's also a very good presentation by Dr. Barry Trow, who's really the, you know, field expert in this. Absolutely, I'm just a particle physicist. He's actually a microwave weapons expert. So Dr. Barry Trow trumps me any day. Okay, but filling in for him now, this is the best I know from this technical document here. If you click on this Rode and Schwartz document, this was a technical presentation. So with everything that's technical, don't get scared. Just flick through it and look at the images first. That's what physicists do as well, just to get a rough idea. So now I'm just going to scroll down very fast. You know where to find it. And the first thing that should startle you is the rollout. Okay. Now the rollout that they have here, 5G standardization, which means they already have 5G, but they are now fine-tuning it and making it very generic. So there's, you know, they're already up to release number 13, okay, in 2015. And we are now here in 2019, which is at the end of this scale, okay? And that's the Tokyo 2020 Olympics here. So by that time, I think they want us under full control, crowd control, right? The other thing I would like to point out, which is maybe for people who don't do the sort of criminal investigations I, spend my time on. When you know this crime cartel, the first thing you should immediately pick up on are these pentagrams. It's satanic pentagrams everywhere. Most people think these are just harmless stars. They are really not. There's so many different ways to draw a star, and when we're dealing with these people, it's always a pentagram. So they know exactly what they're doing, okay? And this pentagram is turning from blue, which is the military color, right, of the crime cartel. That's why we have the blue helmets for NATO, and NATO's color is blue. But as you can see, it's turning purple, which is an Illuminati color. So you're going up, you know, in the performance, and then it turns blood red. So, you know, you get the idea. But anyway, that's just as an aside. Here they are talking about the deployment, and there's a lot of information in that, but I want to kind of flash it up so that you get a rough idea of what's in this documentation. And here's, for example, an antenna, and then they're talking about how you can pinpoint people and how you can send a cone their way. And already this little diagram, if you just zoom in and know what to look for, you will see these lobes. Okay, and these lobes are these collimated pulses. Okay, and as you can tell, these lobes are pointing right at the mobile phone and at this person's head. Okay, so that already gives you a rough idea what we're dealing with. But now I'm just going to scroll down to show you a few more diagrams in this. So they're talking about the beam shape and the deployment here, this one here. Okay, so now here they're talking about beam forming. Okay, now beam forming is very important because it is through beam forming that you go from these concentric circles here that you would have, you know, with the classical system to collimated pulses, which is what they have here. And as it's shown here, the collimated pulses are very focused. They are almost focused onto the size of the mobile phone. Okay, so we are talking about very, very sharp and focused pulses. Now, how big these pulses really are depends on the exact, method used and so on. But okay, sorry, this is annoying when I'm going this fast, but I'm searching for another image that is even better. But here you will get all the specifications of the system. Okay, and I'm looking for an image that really brings it home, that's further down. So it's very technical, blah, 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 somewhere here. Yes, this one. So that, ladies and gentlemen, here is the logo of 5G, okay? Now the logo of 5G is this drawing. You've got the 5G here, you've got this tower, you've got the classical, you know, kind of almost spherical, emissions here. But then it switches to these blue beams, right, that are drawn blue here. They're not necessarily blue in real life, but these lobes are what they will shoot you with, okay? They will pulse these things at you, your head, and your mobile device, and they will triangulate you and find you and focus the intensity trying to hit your device, but then on the way they will hit everything else in between, right? Birds, you know, whatever else, beetles, or people in the street, you know? So that is what we're dealing with. And also note that it's not just this beam, it has fairly strong side lobes. In other words, when you're creating these beams, you have well, this looks like an interference peak to me. Okay, they call them phased arrays. So they make a big interference pattern, and then you use the main lobe, but you've got these side lobes that still can be significant. So it could be that one person is talking on the phone over here, where this little triangle is, and then he gets perfect reception, but while he's talking on the phone, everybody else's head gets hit with these side lobes. Okay? And that could be quite significant, the amount of radiation that you get. And again, note that distance from the source will not save you. You can run, but you can't hide in this system. In other words, if your friend is talking on the phone and you realize, hang on, maybe I'm being hit by one of these lobes, if you run away, it could be that you still continue to be hit by these lobes, okay? Just with the same intensity, pretty much. So it is the fact that we're dealing with pulses that don't really drop off that much, and then it's combined with the sheer density of these antennas. So in other words, when the 5G system is deployed, it is physically impossible to go downtown without being machine gunned by pulses. And that is what's so bad about it, okay? So this is I'm basically, I'm trying to stick to the drawings to show you. I'm just gonna see if I missed out something further down. Hang on, my PDF is stalling, but I think this is the most, I'm just gonna go through it very fast to see if there's an image that I missed. Yes, here you have it again. Okay, so these are these pulses that will be emitted. Okay, and here you can see this emitter system, and it's many little antennas combining to generate these pulses. And then they say they will use a beam sweeping procedure for power efficiency and cell detection. In other words, think about it like they're going to machine gun the entire, street to find your mobile phone, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. So there's a lot of high intensity pulses being shot, through the landscape, and people will be helpless to protect themselves from it. Even if you don't carry a mobile phone, you will be hit by the beam sweeping, you will be hit by the side lobes when somebody else is talking on the phone, and your head, and most importantly, your children's head, who have even smaller skulls, right, and are therefore even more affected by this, they will be machine gunned with pulses. And then, as I said, the intensity of these things can be non-lethal, or if they crank it up, it can be really bad. This is essentially the advert for genocide. Okay, this is the advert for your death, but they have covered it very well. And if you really want to understand, I will just go through the tricks that they have played on us very quickly so that you are mentally inoculated. But then I encourage everybody to listen to it and also see the brainwash, the mind control script run, because it's also running with the music. So the first, brainwash script they play on us is to say, but we asked for it, okay? Look, all these people were outside protesting, increase my capacity, connect me, need for speed. Have you guys ever seen a protest for need of speed? I have never ever seen anybody protest for more capacity, ever. And of course, there are people coming online, but, within reason. We don't have to have this exponential stuff. So the first brainwash is here, look, it's not really them imposing it on us. It's all these customers asking, please upgrade. I want higher capacity. That's nonsense. It's the carriers who want higher capacity for a lot of nefarious stuff that they are doing. Okay, that's what they don't tell you. You remember the CIA, the head of the CIA saying that your fridge will spy on you? Well, for that they need 5G, right? Now that's what this is about. Now the second brainwash script here is they show you what your radiation field with the 3 and 4G antennas used to look like, and then they show you how they are switching over to the new model, but in between they go over the 5 gigahertz license here, and most people don't notice this, but the 5G is not the 5 gigahertz band. It's a much higher band, okay? And what they're telling you here is, look, the 5G license exempt band has so much interference from third-party systems. Who are the third-party systems? Because it's only the telecommunication services broadcasting, right? So the third-party systems are a shadowy group who are already using the 5 gigahertz band. And look at this, it's the license exempt band. So what that means, it is the Wild Wild West band. Anybody can do anything unlicensed, and the government will not ask questions. So what the hell do you think that band is being used for, right? And these guys say, look, that there's so much interference everywhere, which means that there's so many black ops running everywhere in this license exempt band, that we need to go to another band. And as soon as they introduce their little antenna and say how great it is, the beam focuses down, and then when you look carefully, you can't see mobile phones here, you see people with laptops. But then these beams start happily shooting people, pulsing them, and that's exactly the moment where this very happy melody starts up that immediately gives you a feel-good feeling. just play this advert over and over and see the moment when you get, I don't know, a rush of endorphins or whatever you get, right? A very happy hormones. And that's exactly when the melody starts up, and it's perfectly tuned to cover up so that you get the endorphins when they start shooting people. In other words, your brain is switched off. If you just watched it without the sound, maybe you were already freaked out seeing these people being, zapped. But when the jingle is on, most people miss the zapping. Okay, so it's better that you didn't hear it. So that is the point when they are, actually just jeering at us. And you can see that what they previously called the 5G band still continues. So they are saying there will be zapping with this technology and zapping with those third-party, black, undisclosed, projects that are already hogging the band. Okay, so this is what your city will look like. You will not have these overlapping 3 and 4G bands where all your neighbors got the same intensity. They will zap individuals, and when you do that, you can pick what intensity every person gets. You can tailor it to their customers, in inverted commas, or their targets, their target group. Okay, that is the key. In other words, with the 5G technology, your neighbors will not get the same radiation as you do. If you're dissident, if you think that Hillary Clinton is a criminal, well, you will be just zapped with more energy and you will be helpless. Your neighbors will survive, you will die. That's it. And it's all possible with this technology because they can target you and they can tune the intensity for every pulse to be what you get according to your secret social score. Okay, that's what you need to know. So there's a lot more creepy stuff in this video, but for those people who don't believe me that yes, there is a real life genocide out there, I just would like to point you to the genocide plans that a researcher called sorry, I just pressed it by accident. That the researcher called Ryan Zimmerman published. I think it was on medium.com. And the reference to his work is also on my website here. If you just go back to the genocide, you will find the genocide plans here. Proof of global genocide. This was the research library, the bookshelf I pointed you to. Okay, this research library. If you scroll down to this presentation, you will get a link to his work so that you can get it from the person who actually uncovered this. It wasn't me. It's Steemit. Sorry, not Medium, Steemit. So it was on Steemit, so all credit goes to this person who really did humanity a huge service. He also is quoting a WikiLeaks document, and please read this because it's very, very, very important. But the site that he uncovered is deagle.com, okay? And as you can see on the front page, this is a company that is monitoring serious weapon sales. And with serious weapons, I mean all this big stuff. It's tanks, but it's also aircraft carriers. It's very, very modern weapons as well. I think here in the beginning they're talking about all sorts of planes, but also aircraft carriers and military ships, tanks, everything, the lot. Okay, so this is a private intelligence agency. And you can find on this private intelligence agency the genocide plans for every country. So, for example, if you are in the United States, what you do is you type United States into the search, press enter, but then don't be confused by the "we're sorry, no match is found," because that is a trick. It is to divert the unattentive. Okay, they will lose 90% of the people with just this one trick alone. You have to notice that you're on the equipment tab. You have to go to the country tab, and then you will find the United States. So do that, and then you can see how the United States is stated here to have had, in 2017, 327 million people up here. And then in the forecast, 2025, the population of the United States is set to be only 100 million, this number down here. So they are expecting that over the next 6 years, the population is going to drop by over 2/3 from 327 million to 100 million. In other words, Deagle.com, this private intelligence agency, it's not a joke. It's not a joke at all, right? They expect 2 in 3 people to die over the next 6 years. And you can do the same thing if you say, okay, that's the US, we're far away, let's try Germany. You can go into the country tab. Germany, in 2017, it had 81 million people. Yeah. And then in 2025, it's predicted to have 28 million people. Okay. Over 50%, right? What? They're just going to drop dead? They're not going to drop dead by themselves. That means they are to be murdered. Okay, they are to be murdered. And I strongly believe that this 5G weapon system will allow them to do that, because they can target, they can identify you walking down the street, and they can blast you and zap you all day long as you're outdoors. Even when you're indoors, you might be defenseless, depending on what frequency they use, and they will just gun you until you die. And you will just notice that you suddenly have cancer, your health will disintegrate, you'll feel very poorly, and then you will pass, and then all your neighbors who are in the cartel will get stonkingly rich. Okay, so that is what we're looking at now, and this is why 5G has to be recognized as a weapon of mass destruction. And this is, I think, what Alfred meant with terraforming, because that is definitely a way you can form entire neighborhoods. You zap out the people you don't like. So you don't like this person who is over there because he's really clued in and the truther. You don't like this person over there because, I don't know, you want his house. He's got a really big property, so you want him dead so that you can get the property on the cheap from his widow. And then you don't like this guy because he's an entrepreneur and you want his factory. So you just zap them all out. Okay? And that is what this 5G technology allows. Now, under this light, with these published genocide plans, and I also would like to point out, if you doubt the information that Deagle has, go on to orders, for example, and then for every country, you can see how they are listing, many pages back, the precise number of missiles shipped from Germany, to Algeria and stuff like that. So you can see that they are monitoring weapon sales. They are tracking every freaking tank. Okay, they know what they're talking about. So under the slide, under the published genocide plans, okay, under this 5G technology, it should be the more worrying that we suddenly have, we suddenly have over here Donald Trump saying, I want 5G and even 6G. I mean, whatever the hell 6G is. I don't even know what they mean on the 6G. So I want 5G and even 6G technology in the United States as soon as possible. In other words, Donald Trump says, I want to get onto the genocide plan of murdering 2/3 of Americans as fast as I possibly can. And he even says it to you. It is far more powerful, faster, and smarter, and smart means AI enabled, than the current standard. That's exactly right. It is much more powerful, it is much more deadly, it is much faster in finding you and tracking you and triangulating you, and it is AI enabled. Okay? And he says, he's not talking about the American public, he says American companies must step up their efforts or get left behind. Now, when you read between the lines and when you know that Donald Trump is actually a Mason, you know what he means by left behind. As in, if you don't get on board, you will be genocided. And he says there's no reason that we should be lagging behind on, and then he puts in China. And remember, China already introduced the social score. So in other words, the social score will determine who gets zapped to death and who will survive. Okay? So that's what 5G is about. Now, I hope I stopped sharing my screen. So what people need to understand, I hope I showed you that it's nothing like 3 and 4G. 3 and 4G, they irradiated entire neighborhoods. If they cranked up the power and suddenly everybody got cancer, that really showed in the statistics. With the new one, they can kill individuals, literally snipe them out, and you would not be the wiser. It is a silent system. It shoots at the speed of light. depending on the frequency they use, you can't even hide behind a wall because they can literally pulse through walls. They can pulse, well, depending on the technology they use, also through sheet metal, as I discovered. And it is very painful. When they crank it up, it is so-called pulsed energy projectiles. And they can, we found, several of my clients observed this, and myself, that they can dent steel with this. It literally looks like little, not quite holes, but bullet dents in sheet metal. They can certainly shoot you, and your nervous system gets a flash. I get machine gunned like that every single night and every single day. And it is absolutely devastating. I can feel the physical damage, you know. On some days I've got difficulty walking because of this. So that is a system that I know to be already deployed against me. And now 5G means it can be deployed to anybody. So unless we stop 5G, our world will look nothing like what it looked like even 2 years ago. And you're right, Alfred, it is sentient AI. Yes, this AI system is utterly out of control, and it is programmed to kill. That's the truth.